Yo, we ready to get right into it. I'm ready to go. Y'all ready to go? Here we go.
Just tell me, why won't you adopt me?
I'm not gonna say it!
Why won't you adopt me?
Because you're black!
Well, it's about time. A whole video dedicated to my favorite DC chocolate covered brother, Static.
What?
Everybody's raving about Miles Morales' Spider-Man these days thanks to the popularity and success of the Spider-Verse movies and the Insomniac Spider-Man games, which kind of all bloomed around the same time. But many years prior to the creation of Miles Morales, Static was pretty much the black teen superhero, effectively providing the representation that was needed in the superhero space, a character that the black nerd community could actually relate and look up to. The creatives over at Milestone Comics believed they needed to have a teenage superhero when they first launched the Milestone universe, as Dwayne McDuffie wanted to fill the void of having a prominent teen superhero with real life problems, since Peter Parker at the time had grown into a full-grown adult and was married to Mary Jane, crafting a character that was grounded in the social and cultural reality of the time. And after all this time of making videos on DC characters, my boy Virgil Hawkins finally gets his own dedicated entry.
Hey, that's some real good shit, my nigga, for real. Congratulations, nigga.
Many felt that there was a lack of proper diversity in comics, where a lot of diverse characters in the superhero space never got their proper due and were sort of tossed to the side or riddled with stereotypes. Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and Derek T. Dingle all teamed up to combat this by creating their own comic book company named Milestone Media. They created a space for black and underrepresented comic book creators to succeed in their own right, creating their own set of characters and continuity called the Dakotaverse, which all mostly took place in the fictional city of Dakota. This is where you would see the emergence of heroes like Static, Icon, Hardware, and Rocket. DC Comics agreed to a partnership with Milestone in 1993, where Milestone would still be independent and have full creative control over their characters and stories, while DC would have publishing and distribution rights. The first 4 titles launched in this new initiative were the first issues of Hardware, Icon, Static, and Blood Syndicate. One of the key focuses of the work culture in Milestone was to give attention to talent from a range of ethnic and cultural backgrounds who had trouble making a name for themselves in the comic book industry. It wasn't just a space for hiring only black comic artists and writers. What made Milestone Comics stand out was their devotion to tackling issues not often seen in traditional American comics like racism and police brutality. After making comics for about 4 years, Milestone Media unfortunately shut down its comic division in 1997 due to a major downturn in comic sales in the industry after the boom of comic sales in the early 90s, as well as some misconceptions of Milestone books being suited only for black readers despite being intended for a wider, diverse audience. The editor-in-chief of DC Comics, back when Milestone Media first came about, wanted to pitch cartoons about some of the Milestone characters. A bunch of Milestone projects were pitched over the years before Static was ultimately chosen to get his own animated series. Dennis Cowan would end up working with the writers and producers of previous DCAU shows to develop Static Shock. Dwayne McDuffie would go on to write several episodes of the show as well. The Static Shock cartoon shared many similarities with the source material, though there were a few notable differences, such as Static's costume design and a change to Virgil Hawkins' backstory where his mother had died prior to the show's events, whereas in the comics she was still alive when he became Static. Additionally, Richie Foley would end up being Static's confidant in the show instead of Frida, who in the comics was Static's best friend who knew his secret identity. Static Shock was one of the first shows to have an African American superhero as the lead. It's kind of crazy to think about how it's one of the only prominent cartoons or shows centering on a black superhero.
I never knew how important it would be to meet a role model like you. A black superhero. It validates me somehow. Sometimes I wish there was a black superhero back home for folks to look up to.
But there is, and he is my hero too.
Fortunately, the show was met with really positive reception. It was the highest rated show across all the networks for its particular time slot, aiming at kids from ages 2 to 11. The only show to outperform Static Shock consistently on Kids WB when it was airing its final season would be Pokemon, and the show would continue to do even better in ratings once it ran reruns on Cartoon Network. One of the things that made Static Shock stand out so much was the way it was able to incorporate the standard beats you'd see in a kids cartoon, while also not shying away from very serious topics that occurred in the real world, and was representative of what teens could be going through back then or really at any time period. You think back on the restrictions many children's cartoons faced on what they couldn't say or show. They literally couldn't call Slade Wilson Deathstroke in the Teen Titans cartoon due to censorship reasons. Meanwhile, Static's powers, like in the comics, are a result of gang violence violence, and you see one of his gangbanger friends give him a gun right before the Big Bang. Or how about the fact that Virgil's best friend's dad was a straight up racist?
And now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are. I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house.
My best friend's gone because of you and your stupid racism. Hey!
One of the most famous episodes of the show was the 11th episode of the second season titled Jimmy, where a kid gets picked on throughout the episode and brings his dad's handgun to school to confront his bully. But Virgil's best friend Richie Foley ends up getting caught in the crossfire and is shot in the process. Then at the end of the episode, Static delivers a PSA directly to the audience about the dangers and ramifications of gun violence, particularly for young teenagers and kids. The show actually won a Humanitas Award in the children's animation category because of this episode. I mean, hell, Static in the 9th episode of the 4th and final season taught kids about dyslexia and how those struggling with it can seek help and overcome their challenges.
Whoever said comics don't teach you anything?
Throughout its duration, Static Shock would additionally get nominated for a handful of daytime Emmy Awards. Damn, they really crafted a dread-headed superhero who was not only dripped out, funny, relatable, and taught kids about important life lessons. These levels of sauce were just simply not common.
The kid's got style.
Another cool thing about the Static Shock cartoon was its ties to the DC animated universe of shows. There would be a couple of references to certain characters in the first season, but the connective tissues really started to manifest in the beginning of the second season, where the Glorious King and Robin traveled to Dakota to track down the Joker and eventually team up with Static. This would be the gateway in allowing Static to have future team-ups with Batman and the rest of the Justice League once in a while. Static teamed up with Batman the most, having around 4 or so crossovers, including the Batman Beyond Future episode and the Justice League episode.
Batman's not gonna be happy when he hears how you've been treating his guests.
I'm Batman.
And I'm Beyonce.
You know this kid? He says his name's Beyonce.
Really, nigga?
He would go on to have an episode teaming up with Superman and another with Jon Stewart's Green Lantern, both of whom, funnily enough, are voiced by Phil LaMarr. The Teen Titans were confirmed to have been established in the DCAU, even though we never see them. Alan Burnett wanted to set the stage for a Static and Titans crossover before the Teen Titans cartoon aired in 2003. The main concern was that the Static episode that mentions the Titans would air before the pilot of Teen Titans, and they decided to go with a Justice League crossover later on instead. To clarify, the Teen Titans cartoon is not in the same universe as Static Shock and the rest of the DCAU, but I guess that might have been the initial intent.
Where's Robin?
With the Titans.
Who?
You'll meet him someday.
Despite all of the show's success, Static Shock would be cancelled after 4 seasons, primarily because of low merchandise sales. Due to the costs of Western animation at the time, the only way for a show to make profit was via revenue from toys, clothing, and other typical merchandise tied to a hit series. Static Shock was unable to grab the interest of a lot of toy companies and other merchandise distributors.
Well, if it's a cartoon, we got to get a toy. So they went to the toy company and brought the character designs and the premise and everything. And the toy company said, nah, we don't really see a market for a character like that. But we all know exactly what they meant. That decision to not have merch was one of the reasons that after 4 seasons of being the top-rated show on that Saturday morning network thing, Static Shock got canceled because it wasn't making them no extra money.
No, you get your goddamn ass out of here! And there it is, not even 5 seconds. The Americans are ruthless as usual. Racism is running amok out there. They definitely are gonna have to find a better way to hold that racism in. It is getting blatant.
At San Diego Comic-Con 2008, it was formally announced that the Milestone universe would officially merge with the DC Comics universe, with a couple of characters appearing in Justice League of America and Static becoming an official member of the Teen Titans. Ripple effects of the merger would be seen in the Young Justice animated show, which included appearances of Static, Icon, and Rocket in the first couple of seasons. Rather than gaining his abilities via the Big Bang, which involved radioactive tear gas like in the comics or in the animated show, Virgil was a metahuman whose metagene was activated after he was abducted and experimented on by the Reach, who sought to trigger his latent abilities. Although there was missed potential with Static after the second season, where in the third season he just gets relegated to the one guy on the Outsiders team who can't get a girlfriend and doesn't do much of significance. Static Shock was among the 52 new comic comic titles that were a part of the New 52 initiative in 2011. This reboot had Virgil relocate from Dakota City to New York with his family and featured him interning at Star Labs. The series was cancelled after only 8 issues, and the co-writer of the Static Shock title left after the first 4 issues due to his frustrations behind the scenes. Co-writer John Rosen went into detail on how he felt benched by the creative team when it came to implementing his ideas, constantly being lectured by writer Scott McDaniel on his writing methods being incorrect, despite never having written anything previously. McDaniel never read a single Static comic prior to writing the New 52 series, nor did he watch a single episode of the cartoon show, yet he would still go out of his way to tell Rosen that what he wrote for Static's dialogue didn't fit well with the character. There was less of a focus on compelling, character-driven stories, and more emphasis on the book being more action-packed and having more eye-candy moments to keep the reader engaged. There's not a lot of time dedicated to fleshing out Static's supporting cast or implementing his better-known rogues gallery. Static's alter ego as Virgil Hawkins was put to the side as it wasn't deemed as important enough. For some reason, they included this plot of Virgil's sister being kidnapped and cloned before the start of the series, and now he has 2 sisters in the family. It's really bizarre and not fleshed out properly. Milestone Comics, however, was planning on making a comeback, with Reginald Hudlin and Dennis Cowan teaming up with DC to bring back Milestone and its characters in 2015. This was halted a couple of years later due to a lawsuit filed by Dwayne McDuffie's widow, as McDuffie passed away a few years prior to the announcement to revive Milestone. She claimed that his estate was not properly included in Milestone's revival. Milestone would officially return in Milestone Returns issue 0 in 2020, which kicked off a new wave of Milestone titles on their flagship characters like Static, Icon, and Rocket, and Hardware. They wanted to go all in with the Milestone Media relaunch initiative in not only producing new titles on their characters, but also expand in other forms of media. During DC Fandom 2021, Reggie Hudlin and Dennis Cowan announced a direct-to-home video animated movie centered on the Milestone characters. In typical DC fashion, this never ended up happening, and we've had no updates on the movie since its announcement. The biggest announcement was Michael B. Jordan producing a live-action Static Shock movie, which was supposed to set the stage for building a new cinematic universe centered on black superheroes. The movie had a writer attached, but it's unclear how far he got in the scriptwriting process. The movie was also very likely to be an HBO Max exclusive, as the president of DC Films at the time, Walter Hamada, talked about how the more expensive DC movies were being made for theatrical release, while additional smaller budget movies would release on HBO Max, hinting at riskier characters like Static and Batgirl. The movie was never officially cancelled, but there has been no word on its development since the writer was announced in March 2021. And with the change of leadership at Warner Brothers and the formation of DC Studios, the project was likely abandoned. Not giving Static a blockbuster movie in modern times was definitely a missed opportunity in expanding Static's popularity and allowing him to become more mainstream. It could have introduced the character to a new generation of fans, giving black kids today the kind of representation they experienced in the early 2000s with the original cartoon. It's kind of crazy that Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle got his own movie before Static. That's not a knock on Jaime as Blue Beetle, I like the character, but Static was definitely more popular and recognizable due to the success of the cartoon. On the comic front, Static would make a big splash with a new comic series in 2021 as a part of the Milestone initiative that would give him a new origin and reintroduce his mythos in a modern setting. This series I felt catered better to fans of the original series from the 90s as well as fans of the cartoon, as a lot of these characters are depicted and reimagined in a more modern setting, while still staying true to their roots. Even if you've never picked up a Static comic, this serves as a perfect jumping on point as it gives Static a new origin. There are tons of character designs that you'll be able to recognize off the bat if your exposure to Static is limited to the TV show. Many of the designs of his rogues, for example, were heavily inspired by the cartoon. You've got your classic villains like Hotstreak and Ebon that fans of the cartoon will be able to spot. You've also got Virgil's supporting cast like Frida, Daisy, Richie, Virgil's sister Sharon, and his parents. Nicholas Draper Ivy's sort of Afro anime art style really stands out and fits well with Static in his universe. The new origin for Static features Virgil going to a Black Lives Matter protest because his friend slash crush Frida invited him, but police officers shot experimental tear gas at the protesters, which created the Big Bang, manifesting bang babies, giving Virgil his powers. So it still maintains the idea of Bang Babies getting their abilities via radioactive tear gas, but instead of a gang meetup at the docks, it's a protest. The creation and success of Static as a character is emblematic of what Milestone Media were trying to accomplish when combating black stereotypes seen in comics or any other superhero related projects. Static gave young audiences a relatable, represented figure, a teenage black nerd who was charming and witty, yet also faced real and heavy struggles, from family issues to maintaining relationships. Despite all that, he still chose to give back to his community in any way he could. Not only that, but Static also has a pretty cool power set. His powers are electromagnetic, and in moments via the TV show or in the comics, you'll see Virgil utilize his intelligence and knowledge in physics to use his powers in creative ways. He can see across a wide range of the electromagnetic spectrum by concentrating hard enough, generate powerful force fields, magnetize certain objects, and can move large chunks of metal with his abilities. It goes far beyond just basic electric-based powers. It's a shame Static never got to reach his full potential in terms of popularity in the past decade, give or take. The positive response to Static Shock was emblematic of how much people were yearning for a superhero of that caliber. Him and a lot of the Milestone characters have been on the back burner for several years, partly due to some legal troubles with the lawsuit, but even with that, they were still sidelined in projects they were allowed to appear in, like Young Justice, which leads me to believe that Static probably could have shown up in a couple of other DC animated or maybe even live action projects over the years. For some reason, they can't seem to get a movie about any of the Milestone heavy hitters off the ground, whether it be in live action or animation. His team-ups with the Teen Titans or crossovers with the Justice League and the animated series are demonstrations of his personality and heroism bouncing off well with the other heroes of the DC universe. Hopefully Static...
Alright, thank y'all for watching. I think we're gonna do one more video. Let's get